We often shoot videos when we're out in the woods in the stand, and I'm looking this way, Dylan's looking that way, so we think we have the area covered, and I'm talking at a voice I think I can get away with. And, you know, when is the best time of the year to scout? I scout deer for a living, all the way from mid-December to mid-September, and for clients around the country. And I believe there's certain times that are a lot better than others, and there's certain times that are deceiving. I think we should back up a little bit, and you kind of look at what are deer doing during the year. For example, during the winter, it's post-hunting season recovery. They're trying to stay alive. They're trying to conserve energy. And a lot of times they're herding into areas where they're shrinking food sources, the only food sources left, but especially thermal protection, thermal cover. For example, here up in these hills, they're getting out of the tops of these hills. They're wind exposed, and they're getting down the valleys a lot of times. When we get into February, March, there's not a lot of deer up in these hills. They're finding food sources somewhere that has good cover, sheltered pockets. So that's more wintertime. Springtime, they're starting to get into the fawning areas. They're starting to head towards their, especially late winter, they're heading in towards their summer grounds. And then during the summer habitat for bucks is completely different than the fall habitat that they require. They need hardwood browse regeneration. They need daytime browse, thick cover, security cover, and then high quality food sources where does during the summertime need their fawning grounds. A lot of times they'll stay in those fawning areas, and they'll stay right through the fall if they have decent cover, adequate cover, and adequate food sources. Even if the food sources are shrinking, those does will stay there during the fall. Bucks, on the other hand, huge difference from where you find their bedding areas during the summer, where they're hanging out during the summer, compared to where they're going to eventually be in the fall. Then you get into early fall. Bucks are starting to break apart. Testosterone's flowing, the antlers turn hard, and they start to get a little jumpy and a little movement, and they're looking for high quality food sources in ag country. That could be beans, alfalfa still green before the last cutting, and so they're focusing on food sources that are there towards the end of summer, early fall. But a lot of times with beans, alfalfa, leaves, briars, tender tips, shrubs, they're not going to be there during the fall. And so they're looking at more green food sources. So it's a transition time. Plus, they're kind of a transition time between their summer habitat and their fall habitat. And that's, again, I'll repeat this often, you should never take deer census, camera census in August and September. It's very misleading because it's a time of change. It's a pivot time in the deer woods. Deer are either going to flock to and herd up in their fall areas, and you're going to see increase in populations of deer in numbers, or they're going to leave areas, and that property that once held a lot of deer in June, July, August, early September is desolate and void of deer in October, November. And then you get into the fall, and as the deer progress through October, hunting pressure has been applied, and they're really starting to hone in on those areas in November where they're going to rut, where they're going to move. That's deceiving a little bit too. And then, boy, by the end of November, after gun seasons have been applied and a lot of hunting pressure, they're really starting to hold up into their best security cover. And you'll see that transition take place in mid-October, where they're really starting to transition into those best security covers. And by mid-December, they're fully into those security covers. Those are few and far between, and they truly represent I talk about 5% parcels all the time, where only 5% of the mature deer parcels out there hold mature bucks. And I'm looking all over the place because we can see a little ways this way, Dylan can see that way. We're trying to recover up the walk up this hill. It's about a 40-minute walk into the stand. I pulled out my phone from my pocket. It's sweaty. People say, well, you get sweaty. I'm driving an ATV up here. Well, I can tell you, an ATV coming up here, you'd spook every deer within a half mile. We're blowing our scent into a non-deer area. We don't expect the deer to be over here and down to my right elbow. And if they get there, then they're going to smell us. If they're where they're supposed to be, they're not. That's the way we hunt. So, but bottom line is, we get into December, and it becomes a sacred time of the year where December is very reflective of the most secure food sources and cover choices in the entire area. So when should you scout? I'm not saying you should go track up the woods the end of November and all December, but certainly when we're on our way to the tree stands in December, we're paying very close attention where current rubs and signs are. I'm not talking about rubs that have shavings under the leaves. I'm talking about current rubs that designate the second rut, rubs that designate here's a special place where deer chose to call home during the most secure time of the year and where they've herded up to. Critical. easy to pay attention to on the way to and from stands, at stands. We're looking around, are there fresh rubs, are there fresh scrapes? And certainly whether you're on the way and scouting, just on the way to tree stands, not really mucking up the woods too much, or right after the season ends, when you feel safe, you're not going to bump deer off your property. Who cares about where they drop their sheds in February, March? A lot of times that has no relevance to where they're at during the hunting season. But right after the season ends in early January, end of December, during December when you're scouting, that's where the most sacred locations are in the deer woods, and where you should be paying attention to the number one time to scout whitetails, not just whitetails, but bucks, mature bucks. I hope that makes sense. You really need to take a step back and look where they're transitioning from those winter deer yards to spring, summer, fall, into November and December, and why they're moving from place to place, and why those does, a lot of times, where they're at in the summer is where they're at during the winter, where they're at during the fall, because if they have adequate food and cover, they'll stay. Does are homebodies. Bucks move greatly. So let's take a step back. Wintertime, where deer yarding, where they're finding thermal cover, where they're finding those last food sources. They're moving by need, and not because of hunting pressure, not because of security cover. They're moving because of necessity to maintain energy levels, and they're looking for very high value bedding, cover, thermal protection, wind protection, not even necessarily facing the south. A lot of times people make that mistake. It could be frigid cold, 5 degrees, and it's been below 10 degrees, 0 for a week, and after that front came through, it's shifted to southwest winds. Those deer do not want to sit facing that wind with a 10 mile an hour, 15 mile an hour wind in their face when it's 5 degrees. They're going to go on the north side, non-sun facing side, and they're going to find protection. They're also going to find those food sources during the winter, which are few and far between. They might be on clear cuts, standing cornfield 2 miles away. But bottom line is, they're herding up due to necessity, not due to where they choose to be during the fall, where they choose to rut, where they choose to find security cover, those hidey holes. They're moving into February and March cover where they need to and where they have to. A lot of times that's where you find sheds. A lot of times that's not where they're at during the fall. When you go into the spring, those bucks are starting to get out. They're starting to range out. They're looking for those first spring greens popping up. And a lot of times they're back into their summer ranges, and they're starting to feel safe. It's a long ways outside of hunting season. Also, not a time where they're getting out into the open fields. They're looking for green popping up. It's not a time where they're reflecting where they're at during the fall. And of course, summer, they need high value summer foods, high overstory and shade, completely different conditions, not only with heat and mugginess and the type of weather it is, and they're looking for cool shade, but completely opposite of the fall. Fall, they're looking for fall food, fall cover, fall stem count. So summertime deer. Who cares if you find a great buck bed deer in the summer and he's bedding there right now? That means nothing for the fall. And of course, then you get into that August, September time. Again, that's that pivot time. That's where they're pivoting from their fall range, especially bucks, their summer range to their fall range, and any type of census, any type of observations is not reflective of where they're going to be during the fall. It's not reflective of a hunting population. It's not reflective of a controllable population as it relates to shooting does, and number of does. It just reflects a time of change, and it could go either way. If you have a good property, you're going to see more deer. If you have a bad property and you're spooking deer off, poor habitats or poorly located habitats of cover and food, then it's going to be a time that is very deceiving. If you see a lot of deer in August, September, doesn't mean you're doing a great job at all. That's an easy thing. That's easy to get good deer numbers during July and August. In fact, some of the worst properties have the highest deer numbers in June, July, August, and early September. Some of the best properties have the lowest deer numbers and lowest buck numbers during June, July, August, and September. Make sure that you're reflecting a close look at December, what the deer are doing in December and in November. You're looking for new rubs, new scrapes, fresh shavings on the top of the leaves. You're looking for sign that was reflected in December. Make sure it's not winter herding sign. And a lot of times people are focusing too late. Everyone talks about winter scouting, looking for sheds. Scouting in February, March, and April, folks, that's not going to lead you to success other than just telling you he made it. That's what our trail cameras are doing all November, December, January. They're letting us know that certain bucks are in the area. We've already patterned them based on November and December scouting rules. So it come time for the next season, when we know that buck's alive, then we can hone right in on this November, December activities. That also can be reflective of late October. Make sure you're focusing on scouting time that reflects the peak of the season and when you can actually kill those bucks. Not does, not winter herding of deer, not summer scouting. Summer scouting just tells you they're there. Make sure you're aiming your efforts of scouting towards a time of the year where it can help you the most during hunting season. And that's this time during December, early January. Focus on that time of the year. It'll pay big dividends when it comes to hunting season and trying to place your tag on that buck of a lifetime. Now, as we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.